I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe because if I don't tell anyone, I'll suffocate under the weight of it. I used to be a good person. A good mother. I had the kind of life people envy. A beautiful home in a charming neighborhood, a husband who provided for us without fail, and a daughter, oh, my Isabel, who shone brighter than the sun. At least, that's what it looked like from the outside. For 19 years, I poured myself into motherhood. I gave up my career as an artist when I became pregnant with Isabel. At the time, it felt like the right choice. Daniel and I weren't wealthy, and when the bills stacked up, my dreams had to be the first thing we sacrificed. I told myself it was worth it. Raising Isabel became my purpose. And truly, she was a dream of a child, polite, brilliant, breathtakingly beautiful. Her teachers adored her. Strangers would stop me in the grocery store to compliment her smile. As she grew older, so did her talents. Painting, writing, even acting in local theater. Each new accomplishment filled me with pride. And then, it started to change. When Isabel turned 17, the college brochures began to arrive in thick, glossy stacks. She'd spread them out across the dining room table, eyes sparkling with excitement, discussing her future in a way that excluded me entirely. "I want to study in New York," she'd say. "Maybe Paris." The words tasted sour. Each time she mentioned leaving, my heart clenched tighter. I'd sacrificed everything so she could fly, so why did the thought of her flying away fill me with such dread? I told myself it was normal, that all mothers feel this way. But as the months went by, I began to notice the ugly truth. It wasn't love anymore. It was envy. At first, it was small things. I'd stared too long at her youthful face in the mirror we once shared, comparing it to my own aging reflection. I'd resent the way Daniel doted on her, how she made him laugh in ways I hadn't for years. And then there was the art. One rainy afternoon, I found one of her paintings drying in the studio. It was breathtaking, better than anything I had ever created. A portrait of a girl standing alone on a cliff, hair whipping in the wind, reaching toward the horizon. The symbolism was obvious. Freedom. Escape. I stood there for a long time, heart hammering, jealousy coursing through me like poison. I knew then that something inside me had twisted. I had spent nearly 2 decades building a life around motherhood, but in doing so, I had lost myself. And now I couldn't bear the thought of my daughter living the life I had abandoned. I wished that had been the end of it. But what came next, what I did next, shattered everything. It was the night everything changed. Daniel had gone to bed early, and I was left alone in the kitchen, picking at a slice of cake that had long since gone dry. The house was quiet, too quiet. Upstairs, Isabel's door was closed, lights spilling faintly beneath the crack. I knew she was awake, likely journaling or sketching as she often did. I should have left it alone. I should have respected her privacy. But that seed of envy had been growing roots, twisting deeper with each passing day. I felt as though I was suffocating under the weight of her potential, of the future that seemed to shine brighter for her than it ever had for me. I poured myself a glass of wine, then another, the liquid dulling my better judgment. I crept upstairs and stood before her door, hand trembling as I knocked softly. "Mom?" Isabel called out. "I'm a little busy." "Oh, I just wanted to say goodnight." I tried to keep my voice light. After a beat, I heard her chair scrape back and the door opened a crack. Her face was flushed from excitement. "I got an email today. From the Montclair School of Arts. They want me to submit my portfolio. And they hinted I'd likely get a full scholarship." I forced a smile. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." She beamed. "It's my dream, Mom." I nodded, swallowing the bitter taste in my throat. We exchanged a quick hug, and she returned to her work. But my heart was racing. A full scholarship. Montclair. That wasn't just across town. It was across the country. The thought of her leaving, of being left behind in this empty house, was unbearable. Hours passed. Daniel snored softly beside me, unaware as I lay wide-eyed in the dark. By midnight, something in me snapped. I rose and tiptoed back to Isabel's room. The door was ajar now. She must have fallen asleep with the lamp on. On her desk sat her laptop and a thick sketchbook. And there, peeking out beneath her diary, was a printed letter, an official one. My breath caught. I pulled it free. "We are pleased to inform you," it began. My eyes blurred with tears. It was real. She was going. She would leave me. I gripped the letter tightly, fingers shaking. Then I did the unforgivable. I took it. I fled to the laundry room, locked the door behind me, and with trembling hands, I ripped the letter into pieces. My breath came in ragged gasps. As if possessed, I struck a match and burned the pieces in the metal waste bin. The flames consumed the paper, smoke curling toward the ceiling. When it was done, I stood in the dark, the bin smoldering at my feet, my heart pounding so loud I could barely think. I told myself I was protecting her, that the world out there would eat her alive, that she needed me. But in truth, it was my own weakness. And I had just crossed a line I could never uncross. Morning came like a cruel joke. The sunlight that filtered through the curtains felt harsh, exposing me in my shame. I barely slept. My head pounded and my stomach twisted in knots. But I had to play the role, had to act as though nothing had changed. I came downstairs to find Isabel at the table, sipping tea with her laptop open. "Morning," she chirped. Her eyes sparkled. She didn't know yet. "Good morning, love," I said, forcing a calm I didn't feel. My voice came out dry, too high-pitched. I quickly busied myself with the coffee machine, hands trembling. For the next hour, I watched her refresh her email inbox obsessively. She kept opening and closing her laptop, tapping her fingers on the table. Still no reply from Montclair, she muttered, frowning. They said they'd be sending the formal scholarship documents any day now. A cold sweat broke across my back. I swallowed. Maybe there's a delay. Things happen. She bit her lip. Yeah, maybe. But as the days passed, I could see the light dim in her eyes. Each morning she checked her email. Each afternoon she'd glance at the mailbox. When nothing came, her hope withered a little more. I felt like a monster. Daniel, blissfully unaware, noticed the change in her. "You okay, sweetheart?" he asked one night at dinner. "I guess," she mumbled. "I think the Montclair scholarship might have fallen through." Daniel's brow furrowed. "Did they say that?" "No, but they stopped replying. And I can't find the confirmation email. I could have sworn I saved it." I almost choked on my food. "That happens sometimes with these big programs," I lied quickly. "You know, scams target students. They seem legitimate but vanish." Isabel's face crumpled. "Do you think that's what happened?" "I think it's possible," I said softly, reaching out to touch her hand. "You need to be careful, honey. Not everything out there is safe." The words tasted like poison. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I crept into the garage and stared at the cold ashes in the waste bin. The charred remnants of the letter were gone, but the guilt remained, heavier than ever. I wanted to confess. Truly, I did. But every time I opened my mouth, fear strangled me. What if she hated me? What if Daniel left me? I couldn't risk it. So I clung to my lie, like a drowning woman grasping a fraying rope. But guilt is a cruel mistress. It gnawed at my insides, turning love into something twisted, possessive, suffocating. I began hovering over Isabel constantly. If she talked about applying elsewhere, I discouraged her. When she mentioned her art, I changed the subject. I needed her to stay, to need me again. It was the only way I could justify what I had done. I didn't realize it then, But every small act of control was driving a wedge deeper between us. And soon, someone else would notice. The house became suffocating. Isabel stopped talking about her future. Her laughter faded. She spent hours alone in her room, curtains drawn, sketchbook abandoned on the desk. The vibrancy that once radiated from her seemed to wither before my eyes. I told myself it was for the best. But something else began to unravel, something I hadn't anticipated. Daniel. He was watching me. At first, it was subtle, a glance that lingered too long, a casual question about the scholarship. Then came the more pointed remarks. Strange that Montclair just stopped communicating, don't you think? He asked one evening as we washed the dishes. I kept my gaze fixed on the suds. These things happen. Maybe they chose someone else. But they offered her a scholarship, he pressed. That doesn't just disappear. I forced a smile. I'm sure it was a scam. You know how these art schools operate sometimes. He said nothing more, but his eyes searched mine, as if trying to peel back the layers I'd so carefully constructed. Meanwhile, my grip on Isabel tightened. I couldn't stop myself. When she mentioned looking at other programs, I found excuses to discourage her. Maybe take a gap year, I suggested sweetly. Spend more time building your portfolio. No need to rush into things. She hesitated, visibly torn. But Mom, I had plans. I wanted to go. And you still can, I soothed. When the right opportunity comes. Each time, a little more of her hope crumbled, and with it, my heart. Yet, I couldn't stop. I became obsessed with monitoring her. If she left the house, I grilled her about where she'd been. I rifled through her belongings when she wasn't home, deleting any new application emails that came in. I was consumed by the fear of losing her. And all the while, Daniel watched from the sidelines, growing more distant. One afternoon, I came home to find him in the garage, staring at the waste bin. I froze. What are you doing? I asked, voice brittle. Just curious. He held up a scorched piece of paper, brittle and blackened. Funny place for ashes. My blood turned to ice. I burned old receipts, I lied quickly. Clutter. He didn't argue. He didn't accuse. He simply stared at me with eyes colder than I'd ever seen. That night, he barely spoke to me. At bedtime, he kissed my cheek mechanically and turned away, leaving me staring at the ceiling, heart racing. I had built a fragile web of lies, but it was fraying fast. And deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before everything collapsed. I began to unravel. On the surface, I kept the same routines, cooking dinner, tidying the house, pretending all was well. But inside, the guilt was corroding me from the inside out. My skin itched with the weight of the lie. My hands trembled when I buttered toast. Every smile I forced for Isabel felt like a dagger twisting in my own heart. She was slipping away. Not in New York, not in Montclair, but here, under my own roof. Her spark had dimmed completely. Days passed where she barely spoke, drifting from room to room like a ghost. Her art supplies gathered dust. The girl who used to sing while cooking or laugh while painting now sat in silence, scrolling aimlessly through her phone or staring out the window. And I had done this. I told myself I was protecting her, but it was a lie. I couldn't face the truth. I had acted out of envy, selfishness, fear. And now I was watching my daughter rot in the very cage I'd built for her. Daniel's coldness grew unbearable. He barely looked at me during meals. The tension in the house was thick as fog. Some nights, I'd hear him pacing in the living room long after I'd gone to bed. I stopped sleeping. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind looping through every choice I'd made, every lie I'd told. I began having nightmares, visions of Isabel standing on a distant shore, her voice calling for me as waves crashed between us. I'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat. I tried to distract myself with chores, but even they betrayed me. One afternoon, while folding laundry, I found a crumpled piece of paper in Isabel's jeans pocket. Portfolio deadline extended. Please confirm your interest. The email had been printed. My heart seized. She hadn't given up entirely. She still wanted to go. I should have been proud. Instead, panic consumed me. Before I knew what I was doing, I tore the paper in half and buried it in the trash beneath coffee grounds and vegetable peels. My hands shook so violently I nearly sliced my finger on the edge of the bin. The line had already been crossed. Now I was spiraling deeper. Later that evening, Daniel cornered me. "We need to talk," he said, voice low. I stiffened. "About what?" "About Isabel." "About you." His eyes were sharp, full of suspicion, and something worse. Pity. I opened my mouth to deny, to defend, but the words caught in my throat. My pulse thundered in my ears. "You're smothering her," he continued. "You're controlling her. And I know you did something with that scholarship." My world tilted. "I didn't," I began, but the lie felt paper-thin. He shook his head. "I don't know why. I don't even care why. But I'm warning you, if you don't stop this, I will." He left me standing there, trembling. My web was no longer fraying, it was about to snap. And I was powerless to stop it. After Daniel's confrontation, the house felt like a battlefield. Each conversation was laced with tension. Each glance from him carried the unspoken words, "I know." I tried to maintain the illusion of normalcy, clinging to any shred of control I had left. I baked Isabel's favorite meals, left little notes on her pillow, suggested movie nights we used to enjoy. But she barely responded, her smiles brittle, her eyes distant. The daughter I once knew was slipping through my fingers, and so was my husband. Daniel grew colder with each passing day. He spent more time at work, often coming home late without explanation. When he was home, he'd retreat to his study, door closed, the soft hum of phone calls leaking through. I knew he was researching, trying to piece together the truth. I became paranoid. Every sound made me jump. Every time Daniel glanced at me, I imagined he was about to confront me again. I stopped sleeping entirely, surviving on coffee and nerves. And then came the breaking point. One Saturday morning, I walked into the kitchen to find Daniel at the table, a manila folder open in front of him. His expression was unreadable. "What's that?" I asked, voice tight. "Evidence," he said simply. My heart stuttered. "Daniel." He slid a charred piece of paper toward me, one of the fragments he'd found in the garage. Next to it lay a printed copy of an email, Montclair's original scholarship offer. He must have dug it from Isabel's email archives. "You destroyed this," he said flatly. I opened my mouth, but no words came. "I wanted to believe I was wrong," he continued, voice trembling with restrained fury. "But this proves it." Tears blurred my vision. I was scared. I whispered. "I couldn't." "You couldn't let her go," he finished for me. "So you chose to ruin her future instead." I broke down, sobbing. "She's my whole life, Daniel. When she leaves, what will I have?" "You'll have nothing if you keep this up," he snapped. "And neither will she." I collapsed into a chair, head in my hands. The weight of it all crushed me. The guilt, the lies, the fear, it had consumed me completely. Daniel's voice softened, but his words were steel. "You need to tell her. If you don't, I will." Panic surged through me. "No, please. Let me do it. Let me make it right." He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded grimly. "You have 1 week. After that, it's out of your hands." He stood, gathering the folder and leaving me alone at the table, shattered. I knew I had no choice. I had to confess to my daughter. But how do you tell someone you've stolen their future? That the one person they trusted most betrayed them in the worst way? I didn't know. I only knew that time was running out. The next week passed in a fog of dread. Every moment spent near Isabel felt like walking a tightrope stretched over an abyss. She barely looked at me now. When she did, there was a sadness in her eyes that pierced deeper than any anger could. I wondered, with growing despair, if she already suspected something, if some part of her heart knew I was the reason for her fading dreams. Daniel kept his word. He didn't say a thing to Isabel. But his silence was a loaded gun, pointed straight at me. The deadline loomed like a storm cloud. 1 week, he'd said. By day 6, my nerves were in tatters. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I would start to speak and choke on my own shame. But it was Isabel herself who forced my hand. That Friday evening, I found her sitting on the back porch, legs curled beneath her, staring out at the garden. The last rays of sunlight caught her hair, but she looked so small, so fragile. Mind if I join you? I asked, voice barely a whisper. She shrugged, not looking up. I sat beside her in silence. The words clawed at my throat, desperate to be released. Finally, she broke it. Why does it feel like my life's on hold? She murmured. Like something slipped away, and I don't know why. Tears pricked my eyes. My hands trembled in my lap. Sweetheart, I whispered, there's something I need to tell you. She turned, brows drawn in quiet confusion. What? I drew a shaky breath. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely think. I made a terrible mistake. The words tumbled out, jagged and raw. When you got the Montclair scholarship. My voice broke. I was so afraid of losing you. Of being left behind. Her eyes widened in dawning horror. I destroyed the letter, I sobbed. I lied. I said it was a scam. I couldn't bear the thought of you leaving. I was wrong. So wrong. Silence. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as Isabel stared at me, her face frozen in shock. Then, slowly, her expression crumpled, betrayal, heartbreak, rage all flooding in at once. You what? She gasped. You ruined my future because you couldn't let me go? I reached for her, desperate. I'm so sorry. She recoiled as if burned. Don't touch me. Tears streamed down her face now, and her voice rose, thick with anguish. How could you do that to me? How could you be so selfish? I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did, she screamed, standing abruptly. You didn't trust me. You didn't love me enough to let me live my life. Her words sliced through me like knives. I do love you, I cried. More than anything. She shook her head, eyes blazing. No. You love control. You love having me trapped here, under your thumb. With that, she turned and fled into the house, the screen door slamming behind her. I collapsed on the porch, sobbing uncontrollably. It was done. The truth was out, and I had lost her. I don't know how long I sat there on the porch, hunched over, shaking with sobs. The sun had long since set, and the evening chill crept into my bones, but I couldn't move. Inside the house, the air was thick with tension. Every sound echoed unnaturally, Isabel's footsteps pounding up the stairs, her door slamming shut. The silence that followed was suffocating. I eventually forced myself inside, trembling, eyes swollen and red. Daniel was waiting in the hallway, arms crossed, face grim. You told her, he said quietly. I nodded, unable to speak. A long silence stretched between us. Then, in a voice void of warmth, he said, Good. At least that part is done. I opened my mouth to plead, to ask him what to do, how to fix this, but the words caught in my throat. There was no fixing it. Not anymore. Daniel shook his head. I'm staying with my sister tonight, he said flatly. I need space. And so does Isabel. Panic surged through me. Daniel, please. He cut me off with a look so cold it froze me in place. You broke her, Maria. You broke our family. His voice cracked with restrained fury. I can't even look at you right now. With that, he grabbed an overnight bag and left. The front door clicked shut behind him, leaving me alone in a house that suddenly felt cavernous and cold. I climbed the stairs slowly, as if my legs were weighed down by stone. I stopped outside Isabel's door, hesitating, heart pounding. "Isabel," I whispered, voice trembling. "Please, can we talk?" There was no response. I leaned my forehead against the door, tears streaming down my cheeks. "I'm so sorry, baby. I love you so much. I made a horrible mistake." Still nothing. After several agonizing minutes, I retreated to my own room and collapsed on the bed. Sleep eluded me once again. I lay there in the dark, tormented by memories of her first steps, her first recital, the way she used to run into my arms after school. All of it now tainted by what I'd done. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of drawers opening and closing. I stumbled out of bed and rushed to Isabel's room. The door was ajar. Inside, Isabel stood with her suitcase open on the bed, clothes folded neatly beside it. Her eyes were red-rimmed but resolute. Where are you going?" I asked, voice barely audible. She didn't look at me. "To stay with Aunt Claire. I called her this morning." "Please, Isabel, don't go," I begged, voice cracking. "Let me fix this. I'll do anything." She finally met my gaze, her expression cold and wounded. "You can't fix this, Mom. You took something from me I can never get back." Tears blurred my vision. I was scared. "You were selfish," she said, voice sharp. "And I can't be around you right now." I watched helplessly as she zipped up her suitcase and walked past me, her footsteps echoing down the stairs. The front door opened, closed, and, just like that, she was gone. The silence in the house was deafening. For the first time in 19 years, I was truly alone. No laughter, no footsteps, no Daniel coming home from work with tired eyes and a soft smile. No Isabel, humming under her breath as she painted. Just me and the ghosts of the life I'd destroyed. The hours dragged by. I wandered from room to room like a shadow, touching the remnants of what used to be, a forgotten sketchbook on the coffee table, a sweater draped over the back of a chair, a photograph of the three of us on the mantel. Each artifact felt like a stab to the heart. I left dozens of messages for Daniel, none returned. I called Isabel's phone until it went straight to voicemail. The silence on the other end was unbearable, a constant reminder of what I had done. By the third day, reality set in fully. Daniel called, not to talk, not to reconcile, but to tell me he was staying with his sister for the foreseeable future. "I need time," he said curtly. "We need to figure out what happens next. I can't come home to this." His voice was devoid of warmth, of hope. "Please," I whispered. "Tell Isabel I love her." There was a pause. "She knows." But that's not enough anymore. The line went dead. I sat in the kitchen for hours after that call, staring at nothing. My body felt hollow, as if my soul had been scooped out and discarded. Days turned into a week. The house became a prison of my own making. I couldn't escape the memories. Every corner held a fragment of the life I'd torn apart. I stopped eating, stopped showering. I barely slept. And in those endless hours of solitude, the guilt evolved into something deeper, a profound, gnawing grief. I realized, with devastating clarity, that my love for Isabel had been corrupted. I had convinced myself I was protecting her, but it had never been about her. It had been about me, about my fear of being left behind, my inability to face an empty nest, my resentment of the life she still had ahead of her. I had stolen her freedom to soothe my own insecurities, and in doing so, I had shattered the one thing I had cherished most, our bond. One night, unable to bear the silence any longer, I retrieved an old box of home videos from the attic. Shaking, I loaded one into the dusty DVD player. The screen flickered to life. Isabel at 6 years old, grinning toothlessly at the camera. "Hi, Mommy. Watch me dance." And then she danced clumsy, joyous, unburdened. A perfect little beam of light. I broke down completely, racked with sobs so violent I thought I might choke. "Look what you've done," the voice inside me whispered. "You've turned that joy into ashes." I didn't know if Isabel would ever forgive me. I didn't know if I deserved forgiveness. But I knew this. I would carry this regret for the rest of my life. Weeks passed. The house remained empty, a hollow shell of the life I once knew. Daniel still hadn't returned. Isabel stayed with Claire, and from what little I heard through her, my daughter had begun picking up the pieces, applying to new programs, rebuilding her portfolio. Without me, every morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of untouched coffee, staring at the phone, hoping for a message, a call, anything. None came. I wrote letters, page after page of apologies, confessions, pleas for forgiveness. I never sent them. How could I? Words felt too small, too meaningless compared to what I had done. The isolation was unbearable, but I forced myself to endure it. This was the bed I had made, and though every instinct in me wanted to run from the shame, I knew I had to face it head-on. That's why I'm writing this now. I don't know if anyone will read this confession. I don't know if I'll ever be forgiven. Maybe this is selfish too, another way for me to unburden myself. But I need to tell the truth, if only once, if only here. I loved my daughter more than life itself. But in loving her, I lost myself. I wrapped my entire identity around her, to the point where her independence felt like abandonment. I envied her freedom, her youth, her chance to live the life I had given up. And that envy rotted me from the inside out. I tell myself I was trying to protect her, but the truth is, I was protecting myself. From loneliness, from irrelevance, from facing a life that felt empty without her in it. In doing so, I destroyed the very thing I loved. Now, I sit in this silent house, watching the seasons change through the window. I think about the little girl who once ran to me with scraped knees and wide eyes, believing her mother could fix anything. Now she knows the truth. Sometimes the person you trust most is the one who wounds you deepest. I don't expect forgiveness. Not from Isabel, not from Daniel, maybe not even from myself. But I will carry this truth with me every day that remains. I will wear it like a scar across my heart, a reminder of what love can become when twisted by fear and envy. If Isabel ever reads this, all I can say is this: I am so sorry for everything, and I hope one day, when the wounds have faded and the anger has cooled, she can remember the mother who once loved her purely before I let my weakness consume us both. Until then, I will wait, alone, with my regret, and this confession. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to Her Name Was Revenge. Write in comments what you think about this story. See you tomorrow.